The sun creeps over the horizon, painting the Nile in liquid gold, as if the river is auditioning for most glamorous waterway of the ancient world. On one bank, a fisherman shoves his reed boat into the current, giving a nod to the ibis strutting by like a runway model. In the distance, villagers carry baskets of grain, their laughter blending with the splash of oars. The air smells of wet earth and possibilities. This river isn't just water, it's the ancient Wi-Fi connecting everyone. Each year, the Nile's flood spreads a rich, black blanket of silt, turning desert into farmland faster than you can say pyramid scheme. Here, wheat and barley grow tall, beer is brewed cloudy but strong, and stories travel from one hut to the next. Beyond the daily chores, a quiet question floats in the air. What if all these villages work together? Little do they know, they're paddling toward the birth of one of history's greatest civilizations. So grab your sandals, hop on the boat, and keep your hands inside at all times. The crocodiles here don't care about historical significance. Along the fertile banks of the Nile, the earliest farming communities were basically the original startup villages. No fancy apps, just wheat, barley, and a deep respect for flood season. Every year, like clockwork, the Nile overflowed, turning dry, cracked earth into a muddy paradise. Farmers waded into the rich silt barefoot, planting seeds as if they were sprinkling gold dust. Knowing a bumper harvest meant more than just food, it meant beer. Life revolved around this rhythm, plowing with wooden tools, tending fields under the relentless sun, and glancing at the river like it was a celebrity whose mood swings decided everyone's fate. Neighbors traded grain for fish, baskets for gossip, and occasionally a goat for a good story. Children chased each other between rows of crops while elders sat under palm trees, discussing how to keep the irrigation channels flowing. These communities didn't know it yet, but they were laying the foundation for cities, trade, and a civilization that would one day make history textbooks, and maybe a few memes. For the people living along the Nile, the river wasn't just a source of water, it was the ultimate life coach, economist, and spiritual influencer all rolled into one. Economically, it dictated the harvest, deciding whether the year would be a feast or a fast. Culturally, it inspired songs, dances, and even pickup lines like, "You're as beautiful as the Nile at sunset." Religiously, the Nile was worshipped as a divine being, Hapi, the god of inundation, bringing the annual flood that kept the land fertile. Priests held ceremonies to honor the river, offering bread, beer, and sometimes a perfectly good goat, which probably didn't volunteer. Every ripple seemed to carry a blessing, every flood a promise. Fishermen thanked it for their catch, farmers prayed for gentle waters, and travelers used it as a highway connecting distant communities. Without the Nile, there would be no wheat fields, no thriving trade, no grand temples, just a lot of sand and very thirsty people. So yes, when they called it the gift of the Nile, they weren't exaggerating. It was the beating heart of Egypt, flowing through every story, every ritual, and every sip of beer. As Nileside villages grew busier, life needed more than just planting schedules and fishing trips. It needed organization. Families banded together into clans, and clans joined to form small tribes, each with its own chief. These leaders weren't chosen for their good looks. Though a fine beard certainly didn't hurt, they earned respect by keeping irrigation canals flowing, settling goat-related disputes, and making sure no one hogged the best fishing spots. Meetings happened under palm trees, where elders debated everything from harvest plans to who stole whose basket. Sometimes diplomacy meant sharing beer. Other times it meant chasing a troublemaker out of town. Over time, the idea of cooperation became the glue holding these communities together. What started as simple teamwork, you help me plant, I'll help you fish, slowly evolved into governance, with rules, responsibilities, and the beginnings of regional alliances. The Nile didn't just feed their stomachs, it was shaping their politics. In these moments between shared meals and shouted negotiations, Egypt's first steps toward nationhood quietly took root. Over time, the tribes along the Nile began to think bigger, because when you've mastered farming, fishing, and goat diplomacy, what's next? Power consolidation. The lands to the south, known as Upper Egypt, and those to the north, Lower Egypt, each had their own leaders, customs, and fashion statements. Apparently, crown shapes mattered. At first, they traded and occasionally squabbled over territory, but the Nile kept reminding them they were part of the same grand story. Gradually, alliances formed, and rivalries turned into strategic marriages and carefully staged peace feasts. Somewhere between the ceremonial beer toasts and the "my boat is bigger than yours" contests, the idea of uniting under one ruler took shape. This wasn't just about politics, it was about survival, resources, and who got to claim the coolest title in history: Pharaoh. Soon, a leader would rise to stitch Upper and Lower Egypt together like two halves of a linen tunic, marking the dawn of a new era. And just like that, Egypt was ready to step onto the world stage, wearing a double crown and a confident smile. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was the ultimate job multitasker: ruler, high priest, military commander, and part-time son of the sun god Ra. Imagine being both the CEO and the spiritual hotline to the heavens. This divine PR status meant the pharaoh's word was law, not just because he said so, but because the gods supposedly signed off on it. Wearing the royal regalia, a striking headdress, a crook and flail, ancient symbols of power, not farming tools for fun, and enough gold to make a modern rapper blush, he stood as the living link between humans and the divine. The people didn't just obey, they believed their crops, floods, and cosmic order depended on him keeping the gods happy. This wasn't a casual gig. If the Nile didn't flood or the harvest failed, all eyes turned to the pharaoh with an unspoken, care to explain? Being the son of the sun had its perks: wealth, temples in your honor, and fancy tombs, but also the pressure of holding an entire civilization's fate in your perfectly manicured hands. The first Egyptian dynasties weren't built in a day, more like several decades of political chess, family drama, and strategic boat rides up and down the Nile. After unifying Upper and Lower Egypt, early pharaohs got to work tightening their grip on power. They standardized laws, collected taxes, often in grain so your tax bill could literally be eaten, and made sure every village knew who was boss. Royal messengers zipped along the river, delivering orders, while local governors, appointed by the pharaoh, kept watch over their regions. Centralized power meant one thing: if the pharaoh wanted a giant temple or pyramid, everyone's weekend plans suddenly changed. These dynasties didn't just manage the land, they branded Egypt with grand monuments, royal symbols, and a unified culture. And while some pharaohs ruled with a velvet touch and others with a granite fist, they all shared one goal: keep the kingdom stable and keep the double crown firmly on their head. After all, nothing ruins divine authority like losing your job to a cousin with a better beard. Behind every great pharaoh, there was often a queen or royal consort making sure the palace didn't descend into chaos, and sometimes making political moves sharper than a pyramid's edge. These royal women weren't just sitting around in gold jewelry. They advised on state matters, oversaw temple projects, and occasionally acted as co-rulers. The queen's word could sway alliances, influence court politics, or spark the occasional dramatic scandal that palace gossip thrived on. The royal family was more than a bloodline. It was a political brand. Marriages were strategic, often uniting powerful families or even foreign states. Princes trained in warfare and governance, while princesses were diplomatic assets wrapped in fine linen and diplomacy. Life in the royal court was a balancing act between power, tradition, and keeping up appearances. Because in a land where the ruler was considered divine, the royal family had to look like a walking, talking, gold-plated version of perfection. And if the pharaoh was the face of Egypt, the queen and the royal clan were the flawless frame that made that face shine. In ancient Egypt, politics and religion weren't just holding hands, they were basically married with no chance of divorce. The pharaoh wasn't only the head of state, he was also the high priest, the VIP guest at every temple ceremony, and the guy expected to keep both the gods and the taxpayers happy. Temples weren't just places of worship, they were political headquarters, economic hubs, and massive PR machines for divine authority. Priests worked like the pharaoh's spiritual cabinet, performing rituals to ensure the Nile flooded on time, and the sun rose every morning, because you wouldn't want that schedule to slip. In return, the pharaoh funded temple construction, handed out offerings, and reminded everyone that his power came straight from the gods. This clever combo meant that disagreeing with the pharaoh wasn't just rebellion, it was blasphemy. And nothing shuts down political opposition faster than making it a crime against the divine. In short, Pharaoh's throne rested on two pillars, one carved from stone, the other from faith, and together they kept Egypt's power structure rock solid. Before Egypt reached its golden age, a few standout pharaohs set the stage, starting with Narmer, the master unifier who stitched Upper and Lower Egypt together like a tailor with political ambition. He wore the double crown with the swagger of someone who just invented it, because he basically did. Then came Djoser, the trendsetter of monumental architecture, who decided flat-roofed tombs were passé and commissioned the Step Pyramid, Egypt's first skyscraper. With his brilliant architect Imhotep, yes, the same guy Hollywood later turned into a mummy, Djoser transformed burial into an art form and a national project. These early rulers didn't just build monuments, they built the brand of pharaoh power. Their reigns blended military might, religious authority, and a flair for PR that would make modern politicians jealous. By the time the Golden Age rolled in, Egypt already had a reputation, a land of towering pyramids, divine kings, and enough gold to blind visiting diplomats. In ancient Egypt, pyramids weren't just fancy tombs, they were spiritual launch pads designed to send pharaohs straight to the afterlife in first-class comfort. Shaped like a perfect triangle, the pyramids symbolized the sun's rays, guiding the soul of the king upward to join Ra, the sun god. The smooth, gleaming limestone sides reflected sunlight so brightly that travelers could spot them from miles away, like the ancient world's version of a neon sign saying, "Here lies someone very important." But these monuments weren't only about the afterlife. They were bold political statements. Building a pyramid screamed power, wealth, and divine connection, all in one colossal package. They stood as unshakable proof that the pharaoh was not just a ruler, but a god on earth with the resources to move mountains, literally. For the common folk, they were awe-inspiring wonders. For the pharaoh, they were eternal advertisements that would outlast even the desert winds. Building the Great Pyramid of Giza wasn't just construction, it was the ultimate team project, minus the group chat. First came the quarrying. Massive limestone blocks were cut with copper tools, wooden wedges, and a lot of sweat. Workers pried them loose, loaded them onto sledges, and dragged them across the desert. But here's the genius part. They poured water on the sand to reduce friction, proving the ancient Egyptians also mastered the art of workplace hacks. Next came river transport. Barges carried the stones along the Nile to the construction site, where ramps, longer than a gossip chain in the palace, were built to haul the blocks upward. Tens of thousands of laborers, from skilled artisans to seasonal farmers, working off their tax obligations, moved in perfect coordination. Food, beer, and music kept morale high, because nothing says, "Let's build a wonder of the world," like a good work playlist and unlimited carbs. Every block placed wasn't just a piece of architecture. It was a testament to human willpower, teamwork, and some very sore backs. The construction techniques of ancient Egypt were so advanced, they could make modern engineers raise an eyebrow, and maybe take notes. Without cranes, forklifts, or even a single power drill, they managed precision that would impress a watchmaker. Ramps were the MVPs, straight ramps, zigzag ramps, and possibly spiral ramps wrapped around the pyramid like a giant stone slide. Copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones, and wooden sledges were their toolkit, and they used them with surgical skill. Stones were aligned so perfectly that even a credit card or a papyrus slip couldn't fit between them. The Egyptians also mastered logistics, scheduling work around the Nile's flood cycles so farmers could moonlight as builders during the off-season. And let's not forget their talent for project management, feeding thousands of workers, keeping tools in top shape, and making sure nobody accidentally built the pyramid upside down. The result? Structures so enduring that they've outlasted empires, earthquakes, and centuries of curious tourists asking, but how did they do it? The grandeur of ancient Egypt wasn't limited to pyramids. Oh no, they went full-on architectural show-off mode. Tombs weren't just holes in the ground. They were underground palaces, decorated with wall paintings of daily life, gods, and enough gold to make modern billionaires jealous. Temples rose like stone forests, with massive columns carved in the shapes of lotus and papyrus, each surface covered in hieroglyphs, singing praises to the gods and, of course, the pharaoh who commissioned them. And then there was the Sphinx, half lion, half human, and all mystery, guarding the Giza Plateau with a stare that says, "I've seen things you wouldn't believe." These creations weren't just about function, they were about making a statement. They blended religion, politics, and art into something so spectacular that even today, tourists stand slack-jawed in the desert heat. In ancient Egypt, building big wasn't just an option, it was a divine obligation. Even today, the Great Pyramid sparks debates hotter than the desert sun. Some say it was all ramps and muscle power. Others whisper about lost technologies, alien architects, or a team of time-traveling engineers with a taste for limestone. Modern scholars argue over straight ramps, zigzag ramps, spiral ramps, or a mix of all three, basically the IKEA instruction manual of the ancient world, but with more sand. Experimental archaeologists have tried recreating the techniques, only to discover that moving multi-ton blocks still makes your back hurt, even in the 21st century. Then there are the wilder theories, sound waves lifting stones, secret internal tunnels, or giant kites hauling blocks skyward. While the experts keep debating, the pyramid just sits there, unbothered, gleaming under the sun as if to say, "Nice theories, humans. I know the truth." Maybe one day we'll have the final answer, but until then, the mystery is half the fun. If ancient Egypt were a blockbuster movie, the gods would be the all-star cast. At the top of the credits is Ra, the sun god, cruising across the sky in his solar boat every day like a VIP commuter, then battling chaos monsters at night just so the sun can rise again. Next up, Osiris, the god of the afterlife, agriculture, and general good vibes. Except for that one time his jealous brother Set chopped him into pieces. Family drama much? Isis, Osiris's wife, was the ultimate multitasker, healer, protector, and master magician who literally put her husband back together. And then there's Anubis, jackal-headed guardian of the dead, whose main job was weighing your heart against a feather to decide if you got into the afterlife or were instantly deleted. These weren't distant deities. They were woven into daily life, from prayers at sunrise to charms for safe travel. In Egypt, the gods didn't just rule the heavens. They shaped every heartbeat, harvest, and hope. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun's daily commute wasn't just pretty, it was cosmic clockwork. Every sunrise was Ra clocking in for his day shift, piloting the solar boat across the sky, bringing light, warmth, and a reminder that chaos hadn't won, yet. Sunset wasn't the end. It was just Ra slipping into night mode, sailing through the underworld, battling demons and giant serpents to ensure dawn would happen again. This cycle wasn't just nature. It was divine proof that life, death, and rebirth were all part of the same eternal loop. Farmers timed planting seasons with the sun's position, priests aligned temples to catch its first rays, and festivals marked solstices and equinoxes with music, dancing, and probably a few people sunburned in the name of devotion. The sun wasn't just a glowing ball in the sky, it was a god's daily victory lap, and every Egyptian had a front row seat. If you think modern festivals get wild, the ancient Egyptians would like a word. Religious festivals were part spiritual devotion, part community party, and part let's impress the gods so they don't smite us. Streets buzzed with music from drums and flutes, dancers twirled in colorful linen, and everyone feasted like there was no tomorrow. Because, sometimes the Nile floods didn't cooperate. Sacrifices could be symbolic offerings of bread, beer, and flowers, or more dramatic gestures like slaughtering prize cattle to please the gods. Priests in elaborate leopard skin sashes led solemn processions to the temples, carrying statues of deities for the public to see, while the air smelled of incense and roasting meat. Some festivals lasted days, others weeks, giving plenty of time for storytelling, prayers, and maybe a little gossip about which priest tripped on the temple stairs. These rituals weren't just religious obligations. They were a chance for the community to bond, reaffirm faith, and, let's be honest, show off their best clothes. For the ancient Egyptians, death wasn't the end. It was more like moving to a very exclusive gated community in the afterlife. Life on Earth was just the warm-up act. The real show happened beyond the tomb. They believed the soul had to pass a cosmic audition, first navigating the treacherous underworld full of crocodile-headed demons and awkward encounters with judgmental gods. Then came the famous weighing of the heart ceremony, your heart on one side of the scale, the feather of Ma'at, truth and justice, on the other. If your heart was lighter, congrats, you got a ticket to the field of reeds, a paradise with endless harvests and zero taxes. If not, well, say hello to Ammit, the soul-devouring chimera with the head of a crocodile, the front of a lion, and the back of a hippo. This belief system wasn't just about scaring people into good behavior. It gave meaning to life, comfort in grief, and a cosmic reason to live with integrity, and maybe keep your heart diet-friendly. In ancient Egypt, temples were not just pretty buildings for gods. They were the VIP lounges of the entire civilization. Imagine a place where religion, politics, and economics all shared the same office space, like a cosmic co-working hub. Priests ran daily rituals to keep the gods happy and the Nile flowing. Scribes kept mountains of records, and merchants struck deals in the temple courtyard while pretending to pray. These temples weren't just spiritual centers. They owned land, managed farms, and even lent grain like ancient banks. The bigger the temple, the bigger its power. Some rivaled the Pharaoh's palace in wealth and influence. Festivals turned them into bustling markets, with music, dancing, and the occasional goat sacrifice for good measure. Walking into a grand temple meant stepping into a world where divine authority and political power were inseparable. Your tax payment and your prayer might happen in the same conversation. In short, temples were the beating heart of Egyptian life, a place where you could worship the gods, settle political disputes, check the grain prices, and still make it home in time for dinner. Life along the Nile was basically a giant waiting game for the annual flood, like Mother Nature's version of payday. When the river swelled and spilled over its banks, it left behind rich, black silt that turned the fields into a farmer's dream. Everyone knew the drill: plant after the flood, harvest before the next one, and pray you didn't miscalculate. The ancient Egyptians mastered irrigation with canals, dikes, and shadufs, those wooden pole and bucket contraptions that doubled as a medieval gym workout. Farming wasn't just about feeding your family, it fed the entire kingdom, from humble laborers to the pharaoh himself. Wheat and barley were the main stars, while flax kept the textile industry running. Farmers worked in teams, singing songs to keep the rhythm as they planted seeds or cut grain under the blazing sun. But it wasn't all backbreaking labor. After harvest, there were festivals, feasts, and enough beer to make even the gods smile. The Nile didn't just give water, it set the tempo for life itself, dictating when to sow, when to reap, and when to kick back and celebrate another year of survival. If the Nile's floods were the heartbeat of Egypt, then the marketplace was its buzzing social media feed, except with more donkeys and fewer cat memes. Bustling open-air markets popped up near temples and busy docks, where farmers, fishermen, and craftsmen turned their hard work into shiny copper coins or baskets of grain. Picture merchants in crisp white linen shouting their prices over the bleating of goats, while traders from far-off lands haggle in exotic accents, offering incense, rare woods, and colorful beads. Bartering was the name of the game. Coins existed, but swapping your surplus onions for fresh fish was often quicker. The market wasn't just for buying and selling, it was the gossip hub, the dating scene, and the talent show all rolled into one. A baker might pass out free samples to lure customers, while a weaver proudly displayed dyed linen as vivid as the desert sunset. And of course, in true Egyptian style, cats lounged lazily on sacks of grain, acting like they owned the place, which in a way they did. Forget Michelin stars. Ancient Egyptian cuisine was all about the holy trinity of bread, beer, and fish. Freshly baked loaves, often made from emmer wheat, were the daily staple, their crust crisp enough to double as self-defense weapons against overly friendly geese. Beer wasn't just for parties. It was breakfast, lunch, and sometimes payment for workers building those massive pyramids. Think of it as the ancient version of an energy drink, minus the sugar crash. The Nile was a swimming buffet, teeming with fish like tilapia and catfish, often grilled, dried, or stewed with fragrant herbs. Markets overflowed with dates, figs, onions, and garlic, adding both flavor and a little extra social distancing. Meat was a luxury for the wealthy, but everyone, from farmers to pharaohs, could savor the tangy taste of fermented cheese. Picture a family gathered in the shade of a palm tree, dad sipping beer from a clay mug, mom breaking bread for the kids, and a cat shamelessly swiping a piece of grilled fish. Simple, hearty, and always served with a side of Nile breeze. If you think fashion is all about Paris or Milan, you clearly haven't met ancient Egypt's runway stars. Linen was the fabric of choice, cool, breathable, and perfect for surviving the Nile's summer heat. Men often wore simple kilts, while women dazzled in long, flowing dresses, sometimes so sheer they could make a pharaoh blush. Jewelry wasn't just an accessory, it was a social status announcement in gold, lapis lazuli, and turquoise. Necklaces, bracelets, and elaborate collars gleamed in the sun, often heavy enough to double as workout equipment. And makeup? Oh, they nailed the smoky eye thousands of years before YouTube tutorials, using kohl to line eyes for both beauty and protection from glare. Perfume came from oils scented with lotus, myrrh, and cinnamon, turning daily life into a walking spa experience. Imagine a bustling street, a noblewoman adjusting her beaded collar, a young craftsman showing off a freshly woven belt, and kids giggling while smearing kohl on each other's faces. On the Nile's banks, style wasn't just fashion. It was identity, charm, and a little bit of ancient flexing. Life along the Nile wasn't just about farming, trading, or looking fabulous. It was also about having fun, and the ancient Egyptians knew how to play. Music filled the air during festivals and lazy afternoons, with harps, flutes, lutes, and sistrums shaking to lively rhythms. Dancers twirled gracefully, their linen skirts flaring in the breeze, while singers belted out tunes about love, gods, and maybe a little gossip. Games were a big deal too. Senet, the ancient board game, had everyone from peasants to pharaohs hooked, and wrestling matches drew cheering crowds. Even sports made a splash, literally, with swimming and boat races on the Nile. Picture young men diving into the water while kids raced papyrus canoes like it was the ancient Olympic finals. On cooler evenings, neighbors gathered for storytelling, drumming, and maybe a little friendly beer drinking competition. Entertainment wasn't just a way to pass time, it was the glue that held communities together, proving that even thousands of years ago, people knew how to work hard, dress well, and party even harder. Before emojis and TikTok captions, ancient Egyptians had their own stylish way of communicating: hieroglyphs. These intricate symbols weren't random doodles. Each had a specific meaning, from representing sounds to full ideas. Legend has it that the god Thoth himself gifted writing to humanity, which might explain why hieroglyphs look divine enough to decorate a temple wall. Early carvings appeared around 3100 BCE, etched into stone and painted on tombs, telling stories of pharaohs, victories, and yes, even tax records, because bureaucracy never dies. Reading them wasn't for everyone. Only trained scribes could unlock their meaning, making literacy a kind of VIP club. The system combined logograms, representing whole words, with phonetic signs, turning writing into a puzzle where art met language. Some symbols were practical, others purely decorative, adding flair to the text. To modernize, it's like every Instagram post also being a piece of fine art. And while hieroglyphs eventually gave way to other scripts, their beauty and mystery still fascinate scholars, travelers, and conspiracy theorists convinced they hide alien secrets. If ancient Egypt had LinkedIn, scribes would have the most enviable profiles. These were the rock stars of the written word, part journalist, part accountant, part historian. Armed with reed pens and ink, they recorded everything from royal decrees to grain shipments, ensuring the kingdom didn't collapse into a chaotic who owes who nightmare. Being a scribe wasn't just about neat handwriting, it was about power. Literacy was rare, so scribes often had more influence than soldiers, advising pharaohs and keeping bureaucrats in check, or at least making them look organized on papyrus. Training started young, with endless hours of copying texts until your hand cramped harder than a gamer's after a 12-hour session. The reward? A cushy job indoors, away from the scorching sun and back-breaking labor in the fields. They were the guardians of memory, the ones who decided what made it into history and what conveniently didn't. Without scribes, we might never have known about epic battles, divine rituals, or that one time a noble ordered 400 jars of beer for a single feast. Basically, scribes were the Wi-Fi of ancient Egypt. Nothing happened unless they connected it. When it came to brainpower, ancient Egypt was basically the Silicon Valley of the ancient world, minus the hoodies and overpriced lattes. Their math wasn't just about counting sheep or bricks. It was precision engineering for pyramids, irrigation, and trade. Imagine calculating the slope of a massive stone ramp without a calculator and still nailing it. These folks did that before breakfast. In astronomy, they tracked the stars so well they built a 365-day calendar that made planting crops a breeze and religious festivals perfectly timed, because nobody wants a New Year's party in the middle of harvest. And let's not forget medicine. Egyptian physicians wrote medical papyri with treatments ranging from sensible herbal remedies to more questionable ones, like putting moldy bread on wounds, which shockingly worked thanks to penicillin. Before penicillin was a thing, they could set broken bones, perform basic surgeries, and even do dental work, though anesthesia was just bite this stick and pray. Together, their math, astronomy, and medicine formed a knowledge empire that kept Egypt thriving for millennia. Basically, they were the ancient multi-tool. Scientists, engineers, and doctors rolled into one, all while wearing fabulous linen. Before there were bookstores or e-readers, ancient Egypt had papyrus, the original knowledge superhighway. Made from the tall, reed-like plants growing along the Nile, papyrus turned fragile ideas into something you could roll up, store, and sell. Think of it as the Kindle of 3000 BCE, but with better durability if you avoided floods. Scribes used it to record everything from epic poetry and medical treatises to grocery lists and tax records. Because even in ancient times, the tax man never forgot. Papyrus became a hot commodity traded across the Mediterranean to eager scholars, merchants, and rulers who wanted a piece of Egypt's intellectual pie. Picture a Phoenician trader bargaining for a shipment while muttering, "This is worth more than gold." But papyrus wasn't just a product, it was cultural power. Whoever controlled the flow of papyrus controlled the spread of ideas, turning Egypt into the knowledge exporter of the ancient world. Without it, history might have been written on clay, stone, or, heaven forbid, memorized and passed down by your forgetful uncle. Even after the last pharaoh's crown gathered dust, ancient Egypt's intellectual legacy refused to fade. Their hieroglyphs still whisper stories from temple walls, their math continues to shape architecture, and their medical texts, complete with remedies involving honey and crocodile fat, remain a fascinating blend of genius and maybe don't try this at home. Astronomy that once guided the pyramids' alignment now inspires modern engineers, and the papyrus scrolls, many preserved in museums, are still teaching historians new tricks. You could say Egypt didn't just give the world monuments. They handed down a user manual for civilization, complete with illustrations. From the Library of Alexandria's Dream, in Tragic Loss, to the influence on Greek and Roman scholarship, Egyptian knowledge traveled far beyond the Nile. Today, every decoded hieroglyph, every unearthed artifact, is another reminder that Egypt's greatest wonder wasn't just the pyramids, it was their ability to think, record, and share. Their intellectual fingerprints are everywhere, quietly reminding us that great ideas can outlive empires, and maybe even bad haircuts. Forget the image of pyramid builders with chisels. When ancient Egypt went to war, It was an organized, well-oiled machine. The Egyptian army wasn't just a bunch of farmers with spears. It was a professional force with ranks, training, and some seriously intimidating hardware. Archers rained arrows from a distance. Charioteers sped across the battlefield like ancient sports cars, and infantry marched in tight formations, shields gleaming under the desert sun. Their weapons? Bronze-tipped spears, khopesh swords with that stylish curve, and bows so tall they could double as doorframes. The army wasn't just about brute force, it was a status symbol, a show of Egypt's wealth and power. Serving in it meant perks like land, loot, and probably a much better dinner than the average farmer. With uniforms of linen kilts, leather armor, and colorful plumes, they looked as sharp as they fought. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler, he was commander-in-chief, often depicted leading the charge in battle scenes carved deep into temple walls. These weren't random skirmishes. They were well-planned operations that told the world, mess with Egypt and you'll regret it. If you think ancient Egypt only fought over who got the last papyrus scroll, think again. Their military campaigns against the Nubians, Libyans, and Hittites were epic blockbusters of the ancient world. Against the Nubians to the south, it was about gold, cattle, and control of the Nile's trade routes. Picture armored chariots charging through sun-scorched savannas. To the west, the Libyans were no pushovers. They brought swift warriors and desert-hardened tactics that turned every battle into a high-stakes chess match. And then came the Hittites. Oh boy. These guys were the heavyweights of Anatolia, masters of iron weapons and massive chariot formations. The clash at Kadesh was so intense, it could have had its own action movie trailer. 2 empires, 1 battlefield, 0 chill. Despite the bloodshed, these wars weren't just about smashing enemies. They shaped Egypt's borders, wealth, and even diplomacy. Victories brought prestige, spoils, and the occasional exotic pet for the palace, while defeats taught hard lessons in strategy. By the end, Egypt wasn't just a land of pyramids and priests. It was a military player that could go toe-to-toe with the best of the ancient world. After the dust and a lot of bruised egos settled from the Battle of Kadesh, Egypt and the Hittites decided they'd had enough of playing ancient world's worst neighbors. Enter the Peace Treaty of Kadesh, basically the world's first let's just agree to disagree in writing. Carved into stone and written in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Akkadian cuneiform, it read like a mix between a legal contract and a we're still friends, right? Text message. The treaty promised mutual defense. Yes, the same folks who just tried to flatten each other now vowed to help if the other got attacked. Prisoner exchanges, and a solid commitment to stop stabbing each other. Literally. For Pharaoh Ramesses II, it was a diplomatic mic drop. Not only did he keep his throne and his reputation intact, but he also scored one of the most famous alliances in history. For the Hittites, it meant they could stop worrying about Egyptian chariots at their door and focus on their own drama back home. The result? 2 ancient superpowers realizing that sometimes peace is just cheaper than war, and way better for the palace garden parties. With the spears tucked away and treaties signed, Egypt turned its gaze to something far more profitable than war: trade. Picture bustling docks along the Nile, where ships groaned under the weight of exotic goods from lands so far away they might as well have been myth. From the land of Punt came fragrant incense and ebony. From Lebanon, cedar wood perfect for temples and ships. From distant Cyprus, copper gleamed in the sun. Traders haggled with accents as varied as their wares, creating a chorus of languages that could confuse even the most multilingual scribe. Egyptian merchants strutted through markets in fine linen, flashing gold jewelry as if to say, yes, we have both style and surplus. But it wasn't just about material wealth. These trade routes were Egypt's social network, spreading news, ideas, and the occasional gossip about foreign kings. And of course, the pharaoh got the ultimate benefit, the prestige of ruling a kingdom whose influence stretched across deserts, seas, and into the imaginations of far-off lands. In short, diplomacy filled the granaries, but trade kept the palace treasury smiling. When it came to diplomacy, Pharaoh wasn't just the head of state, he was the ultimate influencer of the ancient world. Picture him not in dusty war armor, but in shimmering gold and the finest linen, greeting foreign envoys with the perfect mix of charm and intimidation. A visiting prince from a faraway land might be dazzled by the palace's towering columns, the exotic perfumes wafting through the air, and the intimidating number of guards casually polishing their spears. The pharaoh spoke in grand metaphors, comparing alliances to the Nile, sometimes calm, sometimes flooding, but always life-giving. Gifts were exchanged, gold statues for exotic animals, papyrus scrolls for rare spices. Behind the scenes, scribes furiously noted every word, ensuring history remembered Pharaoh's wit as much as his wisdom. His role went beyond signing treaties. He was a walking PR campaign for Egypt, projecting strength, prosperity, and just enough mystery to keep other rulers guessing. In short, when Pharaoh talked, the world listened, or at least pretended to, while plotting their next trade deal. The New Kingdom was Egypt's blockbuster era. Think less Netflix drama and more epic IMAX documentary in real life. This was the time when the Nile didn't just flow through Egypt, it flowed through an empire stretching from the deserts of Nubia to the edges of the Levant. Pharaohs strutted across the ancient world like rock stars on a world tour, bringing home gold, exotic animals, and the occasional defeated king. Massive temples rose like stone skyscrapers, covered in hieroglyphs bragging about victories, because if you didn't carve it in stone, did it even happen? Trade routes buzzed with merchants hauling luxury goods, from cedar wood to lapis lazuli, all stamped with the Egyptian seal of approval. The army wasn't just big, it was well-oiled, disciplined, and perfectly accessorized with gleaming chariots. And yet diplomacy thrived alongside conquest. Envoys carried messages wrapped in gold leaf, balancing peace treaties with subtle threats. The New Kingdom wasn't just a golden age. It was Egypt turning the volume up to 11, dazzling neighbors while making sure everyone remembered exactly who ran the Nile show. Forget every image you have of pharaohs as bearded, muscle-bound men. Hatshepsut rewrote the script entirely. She wasn't just a queen sitting on a throne looking pretty, she was Egypt's ultimate power player, officially titled Pharaoh, and even depicted with the traditional false beard in statues because, well, branding matters. She ruled with a mix of brains, charm, and the occasional show of force. Her reign was marked by peace, prosperity, and ambitious building projects, including her jaw-dropping mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, which still stuns architects today. But Hatshepsut wasn't just about stacking limestone. She was a master of PR. She launched bold trade expeditions to faraway lands like Punt, bringing back gold, incense, exotic animals, and bragging rights. While some male successors tried to erase her from history, ancient politics can be petty, her achievements were too monumental to bury completely. She proved that leadership wasn't about biceps. It was about brains, vision, and a killer sense of royal style. Hatshepsut didn't just wear the crown, she made it shine brighter than ever. If ancient Egypt had a reality TV show, Akhenaten would have been the guy who flipped the table mid-season. Born Amenhotep IV, he decided that the old gods were out, and a single sun god, Aten, was in. This was not a small tweak. It was a full-blown religious rebrand. Temples to other gods were closed, priests lost their VIP passes, and worship was now all about basking in Aten's golden rays. Akhenaten even built a brand new capital, Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna. Because apparently Thebes just didn't have the right aesthetic. But perhaps the most shocking twist? His art style makeover. Statues showed him with elongated features, a pot belly, and a strangely relaxed posture, worlds away from the chiseled, square-jawed pharaoh look. People whispered, critics raged, and historians are still debating whether he was a visionary reformer, a religious fanatic, or just someone with very strong opinions about sunlight. His reign was short-lived, and after his death, the old gods staged a comeback tour. But for a brief, blazing moment, Akhenaten turned Egypt into a sun-worshipping, art-redefining, tradition-breaking experiment. If history had a Most Talked About Pharaoh award, Tutankhamun would win it without even trying. Ironically, he wasn't famous for ruling Egypt. He was famous for dying young and leaving behind the most dazzling treasure trove in archaeological history. Crowned as a boy, he inherited the chaos Akhenaten left behind and quietly restored the old gods, probably while still figuring out his multiplication tables. His reign was short, and by his late teens, Tutankhamun was gone. Cause of death still a mystery, with theories ranging from accident to foul play to an unlucky mosquito. Fast forward to 1922. Howard Carter cracks open his tomb in the Valley of the Kings, and the world collectively gasps. Gold masks, jeweled daggers, chariots, and enough bling to make a rapper blush spilled out, untouched for over 3,000 years. The discovery made him a global superstar, proving that sometimes the afterlife PR campaign is stronger than the life itself. Today, Tutankhamun's name still sells out museum tours, making him the ultimate ancient influencer. If ancient Egypt had a PR department, Ramses II would have been their poster boy, and probably their CEO. Known as Ramses the Great, he ruled for a jaw-dropping 66 years, which in pharaoh time is basically 3 lifetimes. He wasn't just sitting on a golden throne twiddling his thumbs. He was building everything. Temples, statues, obelisks, you name it, he slapped his name on it. If you see a giant monument in Egypt, there's a good chance Ramses commissioned it, posed for it, and made sure everyone knew it was his. He also fancied himself quite the warrior, famously clashing with the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh. The battle ended in a draw, but Ramses spun it into the world's first political victory press release. He had dozens of wives and over 100 children, ensuring his family reunions were probably more crowded than some modern cities. Even in death, his mummy radiates main character energy, still staring down visitors with a smirk that says, "Yeah, I built that." Ramses didn't just leave a mark on history, he carved it into stone, in font size massive. Every great empire has its awkward family phase, and for ancient Egypt, it was the era of internal crisis and power fragmentation. Picture the royal court not as a unified team, but as a reality show where high priests, provincial governors, and ambitious princes all vied for screen time and the throne. Pharaohs were no longer the all-powerful sun gods of old. Some were little more than figureheads, while real power slipped into the hands of local rulers. Regional leaders began acting like mini-pharaohs, building their own monuments, collecting taxes for themselves, and occasionally forgetting they still owed allegiance to the capital. This political game of who's really in charge left Egypt vulnerable, as resources were squandered on petty rivalries instead of defending the borders. The treasury was drained faster than a tourist's wallet at a pyramid gift shop, and the people were caught in the middle, paying taxes twice and getting nothing in return. It was the perfect recipe for outsiders to start eyeing Egypt like a prime slice of desert real estate. The golden age was over, and the cracks in the kingdom were starting to show, literally in the walls of neglected temples. If internal squabbles were bad, the foreign pressure was like getting a sunburn and then being slapped, repeatedly. With Egypt's leadership distracted by power struggles, its neighbors began circling like hungry vultures. To the east, rising empires saw Egypt's golden grain as an all-you-can-eat buffet. To the north, the Mediterranean trade routes became a hotspot for rival powers looking to flex their naval muscles. And to the south, Nubia was no longer just a friendly neighbor. It was a competitor with ambitions of its own. Diplomacy often turned into a game of who could send the fancier gift, and when that failed, spears did the talking. Merchants complained about foreign tariffs, soldiers groaned about being sent to patrol endless borders, and ordinary Egyptians wondered why their taxes were funding wars that seemed to be everywhere but home. It was like Egypt had become the ancient version of the world's most desirable beach resort. Everyone wanted a piece, and no one was booking a peaceful holiday. If foreign pressure was a headache, the Assyrian and Persian invasions were a full-on migraine with fireworks. The Assyrians arrived first, striding in with their iron weapons, chariots, and the kind of confidence only a superpower with a bad temper could have. Egyptian cities fell like dominoes, and the once mighty pharaohs found themselves downgraded to regional managers under Assyrian oversight. Just when Egypt thought it might catch a breath, the Persians showed up, bigger empire, fancier uniforms, and an even more aggressive expansion plan. They turned Egypt into a satrapy, which is ancient Persian for province we now own, thank you very much. Taxes flowed out, Persian governors moved in, and the Nile's wealth went straight into funding wars that had nothing to do with Egypt. For ordinary Egyptians, it was like living in a luxury villa that suddenly became an Airbnb for two back-to-back landlords, both demanding rent, redecorating without asking, and leaving their armies camped in the garden. If Egypt thought the Persians were their final boss, they clearly hadn't met Alexander the Great, a man who treated empires like collectibles. In 332 BCE, Alexander marched in with his perfectly organized army, dramatic cloak, and the kind of charisma that made people either follow him or surrender on the spot. The Persians barely had time to warm their sandals before being kicked out. And here's the twist. Alexander wasn't here to smash everything. Instead, he played the charming guest, respecting Egyptian gods, visiting temples, and even letting people believe he was the son of Amun, the chief deity. In return, Egypt welcomed him like a long-lost celebrity. He founded the city of Alexandria, which would go on to become the intellectual hotspot of the ancient world. For Egyptians, it was a strange mix. On one hand, the guy was a foreign conqueror. On the other, he brought libraries, trade, and an air of, we're important again. It was like your house got invaded by someone who replaced your old furniture with designer pieces and installed high-speed Wi-Fi. After Alexander's dramatic exit from history's stage, Egypt went through the Ptolemaic soap opera, family drama, political scheming, and enough royal scandals to keep gossip mills spinning for centuries. But in 30 BCE, the curtain dropped when Rome showed up. And by showed up, we mean sailed in with legions, ambition, and Julius Caesar's ghost still whispering in the background. Cleopatra VII, Egypt's last queen, tried to play political chess with Rome, first with Caesar, then with Mark Antony, but Augustus, formerly Octavian, wasn't here for romance, he was here for empire expansion. Following the famous naval clash at Actium, Egypt was officially absorbed into the Roman Empire. From that moment, the land of the Pharaohs became Rome's breadbasket, supplying grain to feed the ever-hungry capital. Temples still stood, the Nile still flowed, but the crowns were now laurel wreaths. Egypt's identity shifted from ruling the ancient world to being the prized jewel in Rome's imperial crown, less masters of their destiny and more high-value real estate under new management. From the towering glass pyramids of the Louvre to obelisks decorating city squares, ancient Egypt's architectural legacy is basically the world's longest-running design trend. Modern architects still borrow inspiration from the Pharaohs' playbook. Symmetry, monumental scale, and a flair for making visitors feel very, very small. Walk through Washington, D.C., and you'll bump into the Washington Monument, a giant stone exclamation mark that whispers, "Yep, I'm an obelisk." Deal with it. Casinos in Las Vegas go full-on Pharaoh chic, while luxury hotels casually drop pyramid-shaped lobbies as if that's a normal Tuesday. Even suburban houses sneak in Egyptian motifs on gates or tiles because apparently nothing says welcome like a sun god carved in brass. It's not just about looks. These designs carry a sense of power, stability, and timeless drama that Instagram filters can only dream of. The ancient builders may not have had cranes or 3D modeling software, but they had vision, sweat, and a mysterious ability to make stone blocks behave. And honestly, who wouldn't want their city skyline to look just a little bit more legendary? You might think ancient Egyptian religion died with the last pharaoh, but nope, it's been moonwalking its way through pop culture ever since. The Eye of Horus, now a tattoo favorite for everyone from rock stars to yoga instructors. The Ankh, basically the ancient version of the infinity symbol, popping up on jewelry racks worldwide. Even gods like Anubis and Ra have found second careers as video game bosses, movie villains, and Halloween costumes, with varying levels of historical accuracy. And let's not forget the mummy, once a sacred embalmed figure, now a go-to for comedic horror films, wrapping up more jokes than curses. Egyptian symbols have become visual shorthand for mystery, power, and just the right amount of spooky drama. Whether it's a music video with pyramid backdrops, a Marvel villain channeling pharaonic style, or an indie brand naming their coffee shop Osiris Brew, the old gods have never really left. They've just traded temple walls for billboards and Instagram feeds. Turns out immortality doesn't always mean living forever. It can also mean trending for 3,000 years straight. Archaeology in Egypt isn't just about brushing sand off old stones. It's like history's ultimate treasure hunt, with a side of sunscreen. Every year, teams of scientists, adventurers, and occasionally overexcited TV hosts descend on the desert, hoping to uncover the next Tutankhamun-level discovery. One moment you're digging up a broken pot, the next you found an entire tomb complex with paintings so vivid it feels like the ancient artists just left for lunch. These finds don't just sit in museums, they breathe life back into stories that had been buried for millennia. And the locals? They watch this archaeological circus roll into town, equal parts amused and proud. Sometimes a dig even changes the history books overnight. Like finding evidence that a certain pharaoh wasn't as dead as previously thought, at least politically. It's a mix of science, adventure, and just enough mystery to keep Netflix producers hovering. Because every artifact is a piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle called human history, and Egypt keeps pulling new pieces out of the sand. Ancient Egypt didn't just build pyramids. It built a brand that Hollywood, novelists, and artists have been milking for decades. From sweeping epics like Cleopatra to mummy-chasing blockbusters, the Nile has fueled more scripts than a screenwriter on triple espresso. In books, Egypt appears as both a mystical wonderland and a dangerous curse factory, depending on whether the author is feeling romantic or spooky. Painters and sculptors still draw inspiration from hieroglyphs, golden masks, and statues with that perfect, mysterious, half-smile look. And let's not forget the stage. Broadway has had its fair share of pharaohs belting out show tunes. It's as if ancient Egypt signed an eternal content deal with pop culture. The best part? No matter how many times it's reimagined, whether it's an accurate historical drama or a CGI anaconda-filled adventure, Egypt keeps its charm. The costumes, the grandeur, the eternal sense of mystery. It all keeps audiences hooked, proving that some stories don't just survive, they thrive under the spotlight. If ancient Egypt could send us a final postcard, it might read, "Survive, adapt, dazzle." This civilization thrived for millennia in one of the harshest environments on Earth, not by stubbornly resisting change, but by embracing it with flair. When the Nile shifted, they reworked their irrigation. When new cultures arrived, they borrowed, blended, and upgraded their own traditions. Their temples weren't just stone, they were evolving blueprints of ambition. Even their art adapted, shifting styles while keeping that unmistakable Egyptian soul. It's a reminder that survival isn't about clinging to the past like a dusty relic. It's about remixing it into something fresh without losing the core melody. From hieroglyphs to hashtags, from read boats to research labs, the lesson is the same. Those who adapt don't just endure, they inspire. And perhaps that's why Egypt's legacy feels less like a museum exhibit and more like a living playlist. Always relevant, always recognizable, and always ready for its next remix.